Phoenix area homebuyers are paying above the asking price? According to this article by the Phoenix Business Journal, here's how many Phoenix area homebuyers are paying above the asking price. 19.22% of homes in the Phoenix metro market are still seeing above the list price, and nationally, we're seeing about 32% of homes being sold above the asking price. Is this true? And if so, how? Knowing what we know about the market right now, this sounds a little off. But I have a feeling there's something that's not being accounted for here, so let's take a look. First, let's discuss the current state of the market. Affordability is low. According to this article by AZ Big Media, affordability in the Phoenix area is at 30.1%. And what that means is that only 30% of homes that were sold were affordable to a family making the median income. Now, this information is from August, so it's a little bit dated, but not much has changed since then. In addition to that, transaction volumes are down, meaning we're not seeing a lot of sales taking place. So in order to know if this 19.22% of homes selling over the asking price is a normal number or not, we need to look back in time and figure out what is kind of a normal range for Phoenix. So for that, we're going to turn to the Cromford report. And the last time we were in a balanced market here in Phoenix, or at least one that was significant, was about 2014 through 2017-ish. And if we look back to the number of closed sales over the list price during that time frame, it went anywhere from 13% up to about 18% at the peak. Another factor I like to look at is the sales price to list price ratio. And going back to that same time frame, we're seeing in 2014 about 96% and peaking around 97%. So that 96-97% range was a normal range for sales price to list price ratio in a balanced market. And for context, sales price to list price means exactly what it sounds like. What percentage of the listing price did that sale actually close for? Now let's take a look at where we're at today. Looking at the closed sales over list price chart, we're at about 15%. Now you'll remember that article was calling out about 19.22%. That could be a little bit dated because it does look like the Cromford report is showing about 19% back in October. But the most recent data that they have is showing 15%. And in terms of the sales price to list price ratio, today we're sitting at about 97.4%. So although these numbers are pretty consistent with what we've seen in a balanced market in the past, it still feels a little bit weird considering all of the news about the real estate market, knowing that things are softening and that our affordability is low. So that's why I think there is something else at play here that is important to bring up. And this could make the difference on how people are able to bid over the asking price. Before I get there, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing if this is valuable to you. I'm talking about seller concessions. What are seller concessions, you ask? Well, seller concessions are certain costs associated with home buying that the seller agrees to pay. These can include costs related to home improvements or repairs that are needed, as well as closing costs or fees that are the final expenses associated with a home loan. Those seller concessions for closing costs is what I'm getting at here. Basically, as a buyer, you can negotiate that the seller provides a certain amount, whether that's a percentage of the purchase price or a certain dollar amount, to be applied towards your closing costs. If you're applying this seller concession to your closing costs, it makes the purchase a bit more affordable because you don't have to come out of pocket with as much money to close. And these concessions can also be applied towards buying down your interest rate, therefore making your monthly payment more affordable. And with that being the case, it's much easier to pay above the asking price. So this leads me to look at how many homes are selling right now with seller concessions. Today we're sitting at almost 45% of home sales selling with seller concessions. So if we have 15% of homes selling over the asking price and 45% of homes selling with seller concessions, we have to assume that some of these concessions are offsetting those over asking price sales. It's not black and white, but I would be willing to bet that the majority of that 15% going over the asking price are getting some form of seller concession. This article is a little shocking to see, but don't let it scare you as a buyer thinking that you have to pay over the asking price price in order to be in the game. And it's also misleading if you're a seller thinking that you are very likely to be getting over the asking price for selling your home. While it's still happening that these sales are going over the asking price, you have to remember that if you're in that situation, it's very likely that buyer will also be asking for a seller concession. And that ultimately brings down your net proceeds, so you have to make that decision on what you want to net rather than what you want to sell the house for. As a buyer, it's great to see that seller concessions are so common out there, and I recently did a video about where in the Valley you can find the most seller concessions. So make sure to check that out here and check the description below for our buyer resources. I'll see you on the next one.